Hello, my lovely anatomists. And we're going to do a little physiology too. So I guess I will greet you both ways. Michele Glass here. We are back, of course, with chapter 9, looking at the synovial joint structure. So we are going to be using, here's a generic picture of a synovial joint structure, and then we will be looking at the knee. But we're not going to be learning specific anatomy of the knee. We just need to know the general structures and what they're doing. So remember, when we're talking about synovial joints, we are talking about those that are freely movable. And as such, they've lost some of their strength. Clearly, if you have bone fused to bone, this is the strongest connection and no movement at all. So as you allow for movement, you compromise the connection. So all of the business of the articular synovial joint structure is to add some strength and stability back to that connection. So to begin, this picture here is a diagram from our textbook, OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology. And what we see are two long bones connected together by a synovial joint. And there's not enough detail really to see what bones we're looking at in this particular case. We can see on the very outside of the whole joint structure, we have what's called the articular capsule. And the articular capsule is going to be a fibrous connective tissue that's going to be attached to each bone, and it's surrounding this whole area of connection. And then we see immediately inside the capsule, the synovial membrane. And so the synovial membrane is going to be lining the capsule or joint cavity. It's lining the capsule, it's surrounding the joint cavity, which is this space. And it's going to actually be secreting a fluid called synovial fluid. So we're seeing these two long bones connected with this fibrous articular capsule. Lining the capsule, we have the synovial membrane, and the synovial membrane then is producing the synovial fluid. And so what we see is this capsule and this membrane is surrounding a space between the bones, and that space is full of the fluid. So let's talk about what is the job of this synovial fluid. The synovial fluid, first of all, is thick and it's slimy. And so both of these attributes make it great to reduce friction. It's going to be acting as a lubricant. These are freely movable joints, right? So there is a lot of friction. There's a lot of movement that's happening there. And then what we'll also see is that in this fluid, we have all of the oxygen and nutrients that the living tissue of the joint needs. So notice there's no blood vessels penetrating through the joint. And that should make total sense, because if you had blood vessels extending through that joint, every time you bend or move at that joint, you're potentially damaging that blood vessel. So that could be very, very bad. So instead, what we see is from the bloodstream, you get oxygen and you get nutrients put into that synovial fluid, and then that synovial fluid is able to wash over all of the living tissues inside that joint cavity. Okay. And then also remember, on the ends of our long bones, we have that articular cartilage, and we've mentioned this as early as chapter 6. And our articular cartilage, remember, is made of hyaline cartilage. It's going to be important in reducing friction on the ends of these bones. This next diagram that we have to look at, again from the OpenStax Anatomy and Physiology textbook, is a little bit more detailed. And here we are looking at the structure of the knee, and we are seeing here a sagittal cut. So we have the sagittal plane. So what we're able to see here is the connection between the femur and the tibia, and we are able to see the patella here as well. Now, as we go from the outside in, notice that you have the tendon of the quadriceps femoris muscle over top of the femur, anchoring to the patella. And then in this case, what we're seeing is that the tendon is part of, remember, the muscular system. But here we see the muscle and the tendon important in stabilizing our joint. It's helping to resist forces put in place on this joint. It's helping to support the joint. So athletes and people who train their bodies are very careful about contracting muscles to stabilize joints when they are needing to do some hard kind of movements. We also see 3 structures listed here as a bursa. So we have this suprapatellar bursa. Okay, so we see the suprapatellar bursa. So this is a pocket of fluid above the patella. We have the prepatellar bursa. So this is a pocket of fluid on the superficial surface of the patella. And then we have an infrapatellar bursa, which is a pocket of fluid below the patella. So these bursae, that would be the plural form of the word bursa. The bursae are going to be pockets of synovial membrane and synovial fluid. These are outside of that joint capsule. So they're going to be lubricating and reducing friction. I mean, this is a key theme here. Notice that these are often located in places where you'd have a lot of friction. So in between the muscle and the bone, in between that patella and soft tissue of the skin, in between a ligament and a bone, okay? Inside our cavity, we have a fat pad. So we are not necessarily paying attention to the name infrapatellar fat pad, but we are paying attention to fat pad. So fat pad is going to be adipose tissue in the joint, and it's basically like a cushion, or like you can think of it as some packing material. It's here as a filler to help stabilize, cushion, absorb shock. We named ligament as we were going through those different bursae. So here we have a ligament that's on the outside of the joint capsule, and we'll call those extrinsic ligaments. A ligament that's on the outside of the joint capsule. And this can help stabilize this connection. So we're seeing tendons and ligaments having a similar job in stabilizing connections, helping to kind of limit the types of movements that can happen at these joint structures. If you have ligaments inside the joint capsule, so we can see here, this is the ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, the posterior cruciate ligament. These would be considered intrinsic ligaments. So they're having the same sort of job, they're just inside the capsule itself. Okay, so let's go back to the previous. When we're talking about our synovial joint structure, we should be able to talk about the articular capsule surrounding the entire synovial joint. Lining the capsule, we have the synovial membrane, and its big job is to secrete that synovial fluid. So the synovial membrane is lining the joint cavity. So it's lining the capsule surrounding the joint cavity. Synovial membrane is making the fluid, the synovial fluid, which is filling the space. And then remember, we have our articular cartilage on the ends of our bones. Moving on to this picture that's a little bit more detailed, we have the bursa or bursae with an AE ending. These are those pockets of synovial membrane and synovial fluid outside of that capsule, strategically located to reduce friction. We have fat pads, which are located inside the capsule. This is acting as a little cushion. We see tendons from this muscular system as well as ligaments helping to stabilize the joint. Those ligaments can either be located outside of the joint capsule or inside the joint capsule. And then the last structure to list here is the meniscus. Menisci would be the plural form of the word. The meniscus is going to be fibrocartilage. It's going to do shock absorption. It's going to be a cushion. And I'm going to call it here a synovial sponge. And I'm going to put sponge in quotation marks because that is not a technical terminology. But let's think about this for just a minute. That meniscus is going to get full of synovial fluid, and then the knee bends. And when the knee bends, you put weight on the meniscus, and all of that fluid squirts out. And so it's creating a flow. It's creating a flow or circulation of that synovial fluid. And this is so important because remember, the fluid provides the oxygen and the nutrition to all of the living tissues inside this cavity. The synovial fluid provides the oxygen and the nutrition to all the living tissue inside the joint cavity. So you need to circulate that oxygen, you need to circulate those nutrients so that everything is fed, everything is nourished. If you're not moving your joints, you're not nourishing your tissues, and you can see deterioration of those joints. So one of the jobs sometimes healthcare professionals have is to help people move those joints if you're not able to move them on your own. And that's going to be important in keeping those joints healthy. Okay, that's it for synovial joint anatomy and physiology. Stay tuned for our last chapter 9 video. Yes, we are nearly at the end already. We're going to talk about actions. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.